Hello everyone, welcome to the table. What we want to do today is go ahead and share my thoughts on Conflict of Heroes Storms of Steel, the 3rd edition. And, review, but I don't like always using the word review. It's just more of sharing my thoughts, things I like, dislike, which I guess is like a review, but I don't give a score. I just want to share what went well for me and maybe some things that were a little bit of a miss. Now, if you don't want to watch the whole video, the short, too long didn't watch thought is it's a good game. It is a good game. I think if you have previous edition, that sometimes there's always this, why would I want to move on to the 3rd edition? The rules and play aids are available online. So if you wanted to try out the new rules, kind of new mechanical ideas, I think you could incorporate that into a previous edition that you have. The one thing that you don't get is the fancy 10-sided die, so you'd have to come up with something that would generate the numbers in a similar way. But otherwise, I don't see why you couldn't apply the rules to like a previous edition. On the other hand, what you get with the new edition is vastly improved artwork. The maps are improved. The artwork on the counters look really good. I went and looked at some of the artwork on like the tanks previously, and the vehicles are really improved. So I don't think you would do wrong by purchasing this, as an upgrade. If it's your first time hopping into the system, I think this is a great starting point. I know they have Awakening the Bear, which would be like first in the series. However, this I think would also be a fantastic jumping in point. So overall, I don't think this is a bad purchase at all for you. Now, why? Okay, that's the thing that you might be interested in my thoughts on why this is good. Okay, so first of all, I do want to point out the quality of the components. So we mentioned artwork is great on them. The infantry look fun, the vehicles are great. One, the size of the counter. I know a lot of times folks don't care about the size. In fact, I have some friends and I've talked with some folks that prefer the much smaller counters. However, I really like the larger counters. And the reason why to me the graphical appeal is important is because when I want to involve like my son and I were both kind of visual folks, right? We like, when we play video games, I like my games to look good. I'm a visual person. And I actually know quite a few people that kind of have that same mindset, is this visual appeal. Something has to suck me in. When playing like old Squad Leader or the old Avalon Hill games with, the small counters, black silhouette of something, it doesn't quite draw you in the same. The gameplay is amazing, and ultimately, if it's a fun game, it really doesn't matter what the game looks like, but I don't see why we can't have both. Why can't we have a good-looking game and a game that plays well? And I think this is a good example of a game that looks well and has good mechanics. It plays well. And so, to help support that look, you've got the larger counters. It holds the artwork. All of the letters, numbers, everything is very clear, easy to read because it's not crowded onto the counter. Plus, they're pretty heavy duty as well, and that means these are designed to hold up to long-lasting gameplay. So you don't have to, they're not going to bend easy. You're going to have to really go out of your way to hurt these. Mounted map boards. I know for some folks that's not that big of a deal. You can just put your maps under the plexi and whatnot, but there's something to be said for playing on, a nice sturdy map board. The edges aren't curling up, the center's not creasing and wearing through. Again, really good quality board. They're going to hold up to a lot of play as well. Also, just like the little added extra of the stress marker. They could have just said provide something, but it's a little plastic X. Probably use this in a lot of other games they have, but it's nice that they've included it. You've got that specially marked 10-sided die. There's actually 2 of them that you get. And you get a couple of die 6. But everything is really good. The artwork, graphics, it is just a visually pleasing game. Even the cards are an improvement. They've got the artwork, just the layout is better. It's it's an improvement. So yeah, you could play the old game with the new rules, I think, to some degree, but definitely a good upgrade. One other thing that I thought was nice of them to include were these counter trays. And they're pretty neat. It's like a little Rolodex. The counters are numbered, 1 through all the way down to 80, so you can have them stored in numerical order. That way, when you play, this is my first thought. My first thought was, oh great, when I need something, I'm just going to have to flip, and try to find the specific counter that I need. Each counter is individually numbered, and when you set up a scenario, it tells you specifically which numbered counter to get. So if you need counter 34, well, I'm looking right here at the 40, which you can't see because of the way I'm holding the camera, but I just flip and boom, there's counter 34. And when you're done, you just stick the counters back in. So there's a little bit when it comes to the setup and takedown, but if you put everything back, it's really easy to find what you need later. So it's a very clever tray system. And what I'm used to doing in games is I have, I can't reach it, but you take like these, you know, the deep pocketed well type tray, and you can put like, here goes the infantry, here's the Tiger tank, so on and so forth. So I just can look and visually see what I want, and it's organized. But this has it all together. It fits well, the counters fit, it's good. Ultimately, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine. It's a unique way to store the counters for this game. It's like purpose built for this. I'm pretty sure it was, because it fits perfect. The only thing, and this is one of the rare complaints, if you will, it's not even a complaint, it's just a I wish. I wish I had gotten a third tray to hold counters. So this is the third tray. It holds the cards, and then you got a little storage space for some counters. And this is where I put some of the admin. But there's more admin type markers than there is storage here. So I have to put some of the admin counters in with, say, the Germans. What I would have liked is actually a third full-sized counter tray. That way I could have had just Germans in one counter, Soviet troops in another counter tray, and then all the admin, smoke, fire, stuff like that in a separate counter tray of its own. That's just a storage minor gripe for me, because cards, I mean, I can use just about anything to store cards. That's not a big deal for me. So this is nice, but I'm gonna have to check the website, and I didn't prior to recording this because I'm terrible in that regard, to see if I could just order one, because I would really like an extra one just to store the admin counters. So that would be one thing. If I could change something, that would have been one thing to change. Now, the mechanics of the game. What do I like? What do I dislike? I would say, let's start with a dislike, just to get out of the way. It's not too bad when you get used to it, but you're rolling this one die a lot. There's a lot of dice rolling. Every time a unit does something, you're rolling the die to see what it can do. You know, can it continue on or not? And I only mention that because I have some friends that think that type of mechanic is completely tedious. Like, oh, I gotta roll a die for everything. But it's necessary. And I'm going to explain why this is necessary and why in the long run it makes this game very, very playable. Okay, so let's take that aside. Yes, I have to roll this die a lot. But why? Well, previous games, your units had an action point system. See, in this game you have your cap points, your command action points, which can be spent on any unit. They can augment different abilities, things that you can do. But in previous games, the individual unit itself had action points that were specific to that unit. So for example, in older games, you got 7 action points. So I would activate a unit, it would do its action. Let's say it fired, like if I zoom in, let me get the camera in there for you, and hopefully stop shaking. You would get a fire action, which is 3 action points. Subtract that from 7, he has 4 action points left. And it was that way, it was static. Now, things might come up where you say, oh no, a German unit has moved into line of sight of my other unit. I need it to fire. The problem is, you would then have to flip this to the spent side to end its turn, which it may have had some unused action points, so you're kind of losing out, just so you could activate, say, this unit down here to do stuff. And now this is now the active unit. So it was kind of static in sense of no real dynamicism as far as I can do something here, do something over here. You couldn't react very well. You always ended up losing action points. And when you did that, the turns actually flew by really, really quick. It played like super fast. And it didn't feel like you always had time to accomplish your mission because you were prematurely flipping stuff sometimes. So yeah, that was alright. But then they also came up with a cool mechanic. I wish I had another die 6 right next. I do. Then, to kind of make the action point system a little more dynamic versus just saying everybody gets 7, they had a thing where you could roll 3 dice and you kept the high number and the low number, right? So that's 5 action points. So this gave you the opportunity to potentially have more than 7 action points because maybe that particular unit got gung-ho and heroicized, or you might get fewer. You know, that was a built-in fog of war. And I liked it. And again, though, you were still limited to applying those action points to that unit. And so if I had, you know, let's say if I was super good at rolling dice and had my weighted dice set, boom. Keep the highest, lowest, drop the middle, 12. I could easily end up with a lot of units with 12 action points, or, you know, more than 7. But again, if I had to prematurely stop using that one, there could be a lot of unused action points. Okay, so that was a thing in the game. But what made that really stand out and noticeable is when the computer game came out. Now, the computer game came out, and the computer could remember for you how many action points this unit used, how many this used, how many that used, and you wouldn't have to put them to the spent side to do something else with someone else. Like, oh my goodness, that really changed the flow of the game. I could do an action with this person, use 3 of the 7 action points or variable amount, whatever you're playing with, do an action down here, and then come back and I still knew how many action points. To do that with pen and paper would require you to have pen and paper, a record keeping system. And one thing that's really good about this game is there's a very minimal amount of record keeping. Your record keeping is on the board, right? You don't have any separate sheets of paper where you're keeping notes. Pretty much everything you need is here, unless you're doing like hidden movement type stuff. But in general, there's nothing really required, and everything is right here. So if you were going to do that, that would change kind of the spirit of the game, that I'm now using paper to track all these action points, right? It's just tedious. All right, so now the game was developed, and I wasn't at any board meeting, so I have no idea how this went down, but I could almost imagine somebody saying, how can we replicate that computer experience of dynamic actions, tracking who does what, not sacrificing unused action points, but allowing you to have complete control of your folks and still retain each unit with, you know, a variable amount of action points. And somebody said, how about this? This dice, you roll it, and if you roll under the action point cost of the activity, you're done. Now, previous to this, I think in the solo system is kind of maybe where this started a little bit, and I can't say for sure because I don't have the solo system, but I think the solo system, you have like these chits that you can draw, and they're numbered, and so if you draw a chit and the number is higher than your action, you're still active. So I think something like that happened, because the only reason I say that is because another game reviewer, Once Upon a Game, Kevin Kitchens, he had a downloadable, I don't know if it's still available, but you could download from him a separate paper that had these numbered chits. It didn't have any of the solo game stuff because that's, you know, the thing, but he just made his own counters, and that was it. You could draw a numbered counter, and then that would tell you if you know, exhausted the unit or not. So I think it kind of started with that kind of idea, but then someone said, well, why don't we just put it on this modified die 10? And so you might be saying, okay, so how does this affect the gameplay now? Okay, well, here's how. I can now do something with this unit, and I rolled a 4. That's higher than his action point cost, which means this unit could now do another action in that turn later on. But see, now I don't have to individually track his action points for anything. I could come over here if I wanted to. So if I had a fresh German unit move up into this woods, and this was my active unit over here, I don't have to say, oh, let me flip that to the spent side, sacrifice whatever action points he had, and now come down here. Then do something with him, right? Now I can do something with this person. This German unit pops into view, and I say, oh, let me have this person react. And then he does his action, I roll. Hey, look, I rolled a 5. That means this unit is still available to do something later on. No record keeping at all. And there's no chip pulls. You don't have to worry about, you know, it's just a die roll. It's great. So I think that this was actually a very, very clever mechanic that has shown the evolution of this game system. This game has been evolving over the years, and I think that right now this is a very good implementation of mechanics that I've seen over the years for it. And that's why I think this is worth getting into. It's, you know, if you compare it to other games, people always do, right? And you say, well, this is what I like about this game, this system, blah, blah, blah. I'm comparing this to previous versions of the game, and I'm going to tell you, this is a big improvement on that mechanic. Now, how does this compare to other games? I mean, you have turns, you have things that can act. The only big difference is you do have to roll after every action to see if that unit can continue going. And that's the part where some people might, you know, start to find that to be tedious. Could you get a computer program on your phone? Maybe. But there's something about dice rolling that is, you know, satisfying to do. So take that as you will. Is it worth rolling the die all the time to see if they can keep doing stuff? For this game, and basing it on my previous experience with how it played, yeah, I think so. I think that is worth taking the time to do, because this gives you the dynamic control of your forces that I didn't really have before. So this is fantastic. Okay, so that's what I have to say about the base mechanics. The base mechanics otherwise are pretty much the same. You know, you've got your values for action points. It costs 3 action points for the submachine gun unit to fire, 1 action point to move. They're infantry firepower, soft target firepower, hard target, you know, AP, movement, their defense on the flank, defense on the front. Then you got your counters to draw from random damage. The mechanics are virtually unchanged otherwise. So I don't think that this is going to be like a, you know, a shock for for people who are previous players. The only thing that's new in addition to the dice rolling then is this idea of stress. So when a unit does something, you put stress. They are momentarily trying to, you know, reload weapons, get into position. There's a little bit of disorganization as the squad moves, runs out of breath, they have to catch their breath, and it just applies a penalty of +1 to the action point cost if you immediately do an action with that unit. So I do an action, right? And they roll their target number above that 3, and then they get stressed. Then when it goes to the opponent and then comes back to me, if I do something immediately with them again, I have to add 1. So that 3 would be a 4, and then I would have to roll a 5 or higher to see if they become spent. So it's just a simple mechanic that says, yeah, you can do whatever you want with your people on the field, but there's a little bit of, you know, stress, tiredness, reloading, positioning themselves. Can they hear the squad leader? You know, an abstract form of hesitation, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's cool. It just gives you, again, a little more something to think about instead of just, you know, I'm just going to take this one unit and use it to run all the way across the board or attack everything. There's this, trust me, one additional AP point that you have to roll over on this die 10 really makes a big difference. It might not feel like it, but trust me, if you're going from a 3 to a 4, see what's cool is they have this chart here, the spent chance. So if you're a 4, there's a 60% chance that you're going to be spent. 3 is a 50% chance. So by using this one unit one more time, you know, another time in a row consecutively, 10% increase that it'll become spent, right? And if I do that over here with the 4, and then I did something and come back to it, it's now a 5. Well, I have to roll a 6 or higher. So there's like an 80% chance that this unit will be spent because I have to roll a 6 or a 7. So I gotta roll good. You know, I rolled a 4. So, you know, just this little mechanic also changes kind of that dynamic. So it's not always easy just to have that same unit keep going and going and going. So I'm going to say, so far just to summarize, right? Components are good, artwork is great, the storage containers are cool. I just wish I had one that was a third one of just the counters without the card trays. Then the dice mechanic, although tedious for some folks, I think it improves this game a lot. So the mechanic of tracking your action points now compared to previous versions, this is incredibly cool. But otherwise, the core mechanics are still there as far as combat works. You know, 2 dice 6, you spend your cat points to augment actions that you can do. You still can spend cat points to have a spent unit do something. So, you know, that's one thing I would say. Like in some games, when a unit is, you know, completed an action and you flip it to the done side or whatever, and someone sneaks up to it, they're kind of done because they've already done their action. But here, if you have saved some of your cat points, which represent your abstract leadership ability, you know, extra ammo, food, whatever you want to call it, you could spend cat points to allow this unit maybe to move out of the way, defend themselves, or if you had enough cat points, they could reduce the cost of an attack action and do something to defend themselves. But it all comes down to kind of the long planning of where you think the opponent is, where they're coming out, how you want to manage that resource. So there is a little bit, a very little bookkeeping with that. And I'll just show you, that's this tracker here. Now this mechanic is not new. It's still a very integral part of the game. I have just found that the cat point now, I gotta blow my nose, I'll be right back. Alright, well, whew. It's either sinuses kicking in or something. Whew, we're gonna see if we can get through this. Alright, so the command action points. These are abstract representations of leadership on the field. You can probably hear it. I'm trying to not sneeze. It's sneaking up. And your scenario is going to tell you how many you get. The first scenario in the game, you get these 6 action points. Man, this is going to be tough to get through. Okay, so they can be used to reduce the cost of an action. So, man, like this Soviet unit here, it costs 4 action points to attack with it. I could spend 4 action points to make that a 0 cost. So that put me down to 2. Now when you do that, you don't have to roll this die to see if it's spent. They'll become stressed because they did an action, but you don't have to roll. They're going to stay, you know, fresh, active. Or I could reduce it down to 2, so I could spend 2 action points. Now that firing action only costs 2, which means it's a 30% chance of being spent. You know, you roll 5. Now, you can also use this to augment some of your dice rolls. You can spend 2 points for like attack rolls, things like that, or the rally checks. So it has some use, but now, all right, hold on. Let's see if I can clear this up. Well, I don't think that's going away, so I'm going to try to get through this for you. Okay, had some Diet Dr. Pepper, feel a little better. So you spend your cat points to augment different things in the game. That's always been there. But now this is actually a much more important mechanic because previously I knew how many action points a unit had. I knew when it would be done doing stuff because I tracked how many action points it had and what it used. With the die roll, you never know when something is going to be spent. Right? Because in my previous play, you saw that I could move one of these units with a movement cost of 1. There are actually on this die a 1 here and a 1 here. So there's a 20% chance that that unit will be spent after using only 1 action point. So if you really have to get this guy moving, you might spend some action points instead to get them moving along the road so you don't have to roll, right? So this is a much more important mechanic than it has ever been.
You know, before I would just use it to modify attack rolls, things like that. I didn't give it much thought. It was like, meh, it's some free points. But now, that is a vitally important thing. And it's very interesting to me how important that has become, because this is going to allow you to still do actions with spent units. So now you have to really think about, how do I manage those cap points? And now, when you take casualties, you put a casualty, you know, when you lose a unit, you stick it here, and now it means I'm losing cap because I'm losing command and control, cohesion of my force. And so that also makes every loss of a soldier that much more painful. Like, you really feel those losses now. You felt it before, obviously, because you want to have as many extra bonus points as you can get to do stuff. But it was like, meh, you know, all right, I got 4. I can still modify some attack rolls a couple times. Now it's like, I only have 4? Well, do I augment this action cost to keep that unit going? Or, you know, it definitely has brought to the cap system, I think, importance that it didn't have before. So that's why I'm saying, mechanically wise, this is a vast improvement over the previous versions. This is great. And that's why I think if you took the time, you know, maybe, you know, if you did not want to purchase the 3rd edition and you just wanted to use the rules with your, you know, previous games, I think that's, you know, still perfectly a legitimate thing to do. And, you know, again, if you're on the fence, if you will, about hopping into the system or not, this would be a good time to get into it. See, if you've never played before, you're going to come in, you're going to be like, yeah, all these mechanics make sense. But if you're a previous player, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a huge change, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, I just can't get over how impressive this is to play the new system that we have. So, I think overall, the couple of negatives I mentioned, which were just purely cosmetic, if you will, in a way, you know, dice rolling, a counter trade kind of a thing, that doesn't detract from the game at all. In fact, if you're just going to base this entirely on the merits of gameplay, yeah, this is, why wouldn't you get this? This is fantastic. But that's why. Hopefully I explained to you why I am very excited about this. And I'm just trying to think, was there anything else I really wanted to talk about? Mostly it's the gameplay mechanics around this system here, the dice roll. Everything else is pretty much the same. In fact, I think I read in there that you could just play the game. I think they had... Yeah, in fact, if you have, you could even play the game and go back to an action point system if you wanted. If you didn't want it, there was like a little side note. They included these for just in case you wanted to track action points, because you could use this tracker. That's why it says AP. So you could go back to an older system if you wanted, where you track for a specific unit its action points. So you'd have your overall caps on the board, and then action points so you could track for a specific unit if you wanted. So it's not like they said, oh, let's do away with all that previous stuff. They still have that there if you want it, but I think you would be losing out a lot if you didn't try this new system for yourself. And I think I'll leave it there because the sinuses now are just starting to get really bad. So thank you for watching. Leave some comments. Let me know what you think. Have you played this before? Have you played 3rd edition yet? Is this something you want to get into? Have you played previous editions? What did you think? Do you agree, disagree with the changes they've made? Hopefully, you can share some of your insights to that too. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you around for the next whatever it is we do.